Just like sometimes I tell patients or students who come with grief, having lost someone, a bereavement, I have to tell them that they will go through the 5 stages of grief. There's denial. First there's the shock, then there's denial, then there's anger, then there's the sadness, and then finally there's the acceptance. Over the years I've noticed that on retreats, a person goes through those stages rather quickly, in a more condensed manner, every day. There's some level of shock, there's some level of, at least your system will be in a shock. Why did you put me through this? Why are we sitting here for this long? Why am I here with these people? Why can't I be on my sofa enjoying my favorite show or something? But that's all building towards discipline. It's pulling you out into reality, not pulling you out of reality, it's pulling you out into reality. Please try to digest that concept. Many people come with some ideas, usually feelings. You heard me today, almost every day, say how important it is to come back to metta. I use so many different types of words, expressions to bring you back to metta. Still you see how parts of the brain says, if you're used to with other techniques, to pull you out. I always tell students who come for the first time to me, I say, have you had any meditative experience? They say yes, and I have to gulp. Because then I have to work through so much to unravel, take off sheets of unnecessary junk. Again, not necessarily having to do with the technique itself that they've been used to. So similarly, we have feelings, strong feelings, especially towards feelings that are echoes from the past, wounds, people who have hurt us, situations, moments of embarrassment perhaps, angry moments from our past, which oddly enough brings me back to what I was telling you yesterday about the principle, where my mind went all of a sudden into Alzheimer mode and I didn't recognize, well, I started with something. There was a reason why I was telling you about that childhood elementary where the principal had the wooden staff and he would beat us. Because yesterday I had to meet some of you, and in my encounters I saw how important it is for some of us to carry the wounds from our past, the anger from the past. It stays with us, almost like a shadow. Which prompted me to bring that story from my past, an analogy, a metaphor, if you will. Because that same principle who used to beat us in Beirut, Lebanon, where I was born, where I was a child. Decades later, I see this person across the street from where I lived in Los Angeles, in America, at the grocery store where I would go to buy my groceries as a layman. There he was standing with his wife, much older man, a now much smaller man than I. Part of the brain goes, I could take him out. I could show him a good beating, not just from my part, but from all of my friends who used to get beat up by this person. Now he is there. Never had anybody touch him. But I could be vengeful. So, thoughts. Earlier I was talking about thoughts running through the mind, right? But something interesting was happening. I was comfily sitting there in my mind, on my chair called Sati, observing every single thing that was happening. Like, oh really? You would like to beat him up? What else would you like? And then I looked and I saw so much sadness in his demeanor, not having any clue as to what's happening to him and what will happen to him. No idea about any karma. So we have to let go of the past. Otherwise it could be dragging on. I have to convince people to let the past stay in the past and allow the past to teach us a few things about ourselves, about chiseling us a new character, a new personality. That's why the personality development takes place. When we talked about the Sangyojana a few days ago, what was that? It's not a miraculous thing that happens. It happens because you're putting in effort to change your life. Every time the idea of me, my pain, my wound, my stuff comes up, you're having to take a different look and saying, really, I was a child. I don't think this guy now is going to pull his hand up and try to hit me. I don't think he will dare. So the conditions were right. He felt like he was in his power domain. He could do that in his mind, because he was the top of the top in that environment, untouchable himself. Basically, lost in his ignorance. Lost in his ignorance. But isn't that what we do? Because of somebody else's inflicted wounds, they inflicted upon us. They have to bear that. But we don't think about that. We think, you did this to me, so now I have to retaliate. You have entire religions based on this. Middle Eastern religions are based on this. You know, in Christianity and stuff, it's the same thing, even though they say, turn the other cheek, but it's not. Look at Christianity's history. Most of the wars were done by them. Christians. Huh?
Eye for an eye?
Yes. Leaves everybody blind. So why? We don't have to. There's definitely no transformation to take place. Lord Buddha knew about this. And he taught it. Sometimes we forget of how the students were not just otherworldly beings who were somehow there. Last week, Brother Tio over there, he was sitting over there and he asked about Venerable Angulimala. What about his past, Bhante? Well, let's leave ourselves out of it and just go into Venerable Angulimala's brain, in his mind. Have you ever slapped a person? Have you ever harmed a person? Insulted a person? And then it comes to haunt you, especially when you go into meditation. I shouldn't have done that. Well, Angulimala, Venerable Angulimala, slit people's throats, killed them, strangled them, butchered them, and then cut off their fingers. Do you think that meditation came easy for him? Lord Buddha was always there, showering him with compassion. Otherwise he would not go deep into any of the jhanas. He couldn't even sit still because of this enormous mountain of guilt that he had to negotiate. I did this. Tell me if that's not human. Can you relate with that? So please don't put these individuals you hear about, including Lord Buddha himself, onto this pedestal that is untouchable, that is beyond human. They had a supernatural something about them. And for that reason, I cannot sit as long or as steadily as they could. Time was different then, Bhante. There were more arahants then because they were different types of people. I used to think like this. So I understand. But please let us pull ourselves out of that deception, because that is still Mara. Mara will use every trick in the book. He invented the book, you know. Book of deception. He will come after you even after you become an arahant. Do you know that? He used to taunt Lord Buddha himself. Imagine that. He would come, and one time Venerable Sariputta had just shaved his head. In those days, they didn't, it was like a luxury. That's why Lord Buddha said, okay, every 2 weeks. So he had shaved his head. And he was, you could almost see, like, he was like, yeah, relaxing. We can imagine that it was probably in the summertime in India, pretty hot. Maybe he had also had a nice bath. So he was just enjoying a moment of meditation, and these two yakkas were just floating around, and they see one of them is evil-minded. He says, oh, look at that recluse over there. He's telling this to his buddy. I'm going to smack him on his head. I'm going to hit him. Just for fun. And the other yakka says, don't you dare. These are the recluses of the Gautama, teacher of the Sakyas, the Buddha. These are special beings. Don't do this. You will regret it. And he is a chief disciple on top of that. If you hit him, it will be immediate. The effect, don't do this. And he says, no, I'm going to get away with it. I do this all the time with humans. What's the difference between this human and other humans? Wrong decision. He goes and hits Venerable Sariputta on the head. Venerable Mahamoggallana sees this from afar, and immediately he shows up. By the time he's there, that quickly already, the other yakka is down into the depths of hell. Immediately. But Venerable Sariputta says, ooh, what was that? This is the interesting part in this discussion, because they were the two chief disciples. And they had been, reborn several times at the same time, close to each other, because their kamma, their determination, had always been very closely tied together, as well as in this life. Because they had made the vow together to become chief disciples long time ago, in front of a Buddha, like I was saying yesterday, as to what are the requirements for somebody to be actually, officially recognized as a future bodhisattva. Those are really rare, because they become Buddhas. So similarly with chief disciples. So anyhow, Venerable Mahamoggallana says, friend, are you all right? Because there was this yakka who came here and hit you with a blow so powerful that it could crack a mountain into half. So I rushed to come and check on my friend. Venerable Sariputta's response is, it's amazing, it's wonderful, he says, how the chief disciple, Moggallana, is able to see this from so far. And on top of that, see, it was a yakka to have this ability. But, he says, I have this severe cracking headache in my skull. I didn't know what it was. And Venerable Mahamudra Galana says, it's amazing, it's wonderful that Venerable Sariputta only got to feel a headache, a splitting headache, but nevertheless a headache from that strong of a blow. So sometimes I feel to share these stories, and I would love for you to allow it to land wherever it may, in your mind, into your subconscious, if you will, into your heart, to move you, to be touched. Because these are human beings we're talking about. At one point, they also suffered difficulties. Now, that doesn't mean that every time you have a difficulty or a pain, doesn't mean that there's a yakka with a sledgehammer trying to crack you open, okay? I know your fascination with evil spirits and all that nonsense in Asia. By the way, I was asking someone the other day, what is this fascination with evil spirits and ghosts that you have here? What about devas? What's wrong with them? How come they never come to your mind? They're more numerous, you know. And every time there's a true Dhamma being taught, they show up. So don't be surprised if a few of them are here. And I'm not using that metaphorically. So, several things I covered with you this week. So I wanted to present suttas that can help the practice, the understanding, to see the relevancy of what you're doing with what this path leads to. A key factor to always be reminded of is your relationship with the outside world. And the conduit, the gates to the outside world are none other than your 6 senses. Again, in Buddhism, we have the 5 senses plus the mind. That's what makes it 6. And the mind is the supreme. The mind is the most powerful because the mind is the interpreter of all the things that we see. Because the eyes cannot remember a sight that they've seen. The ears cannot remember a sound. The body will not remember a touch. It's the mind. So even when I say in metta, the body will never forget, with the help of the mind, the 6th of the senses. So always check your relationship with the outside world by putting the camera, putting the spotlight on the senses, not the form that is outside of you, not this annoying boss, then not this annoying partner maybe, this wife, this husband, this boyfriend, this girlfriend, whatever, this mother-in-law, this father, whatever. Ultimately, what matters is your addition. What condiments, what ingredients do you put on to the real happening, whatever's happening? That is what you can control, not your mother-in-law. Ultimately. So this sutta that I'll cover with you today, it's called the Pancangika Sutta. And it's Pancha means 5. Anga means factor. Like Bojjhanga, Anga, it's a factor. Factor of 1, factors. Anguttara Nikaya, it's a factor of 1. So they just 5-factored. It was a term that they used a lot in at time of Lord Buddha's. So this has to do with the practice of meditation, specifically, and the different types of jhanas that we go through, preparing the mind. So I introduced this sutta to help you with the progress as to where it can take you. So I do not wish for these 3 days to just remain 3 days of retreats that you've done and that's it. Thank you very much. Goodbye. That's it. Nice memory. Maybe get a picture at the end. Yay. means nothing if you're not going to be really using that as a brick to build upon, add more. The most important part is the work that you will do on your own. Okay? So use these suttas, go back and listen to them. Once they, Brother Leslie, Brother Jason put them up, of course that's a lot of work, and so when they are put up online, do listen to them again and again and again. You will gain something, I guarantee it. Something that you didn't see before. Every time I go back to a sutta that I've seen, I've read, I've explored, I've taught, I go back, read it, listen to it again. I was like, oh, how did I miss that? Whoa! There's always something wonderful hiding. Hiding because of avidya, one's own avidya. So, this comes from the book, because it's 5, remember, if it's in the Anguttara Nikaya and you have these suttas, any sutta, and if it falls in, let's say, a specific group, book of the 5, this one is coming from the book of 5s, you automatically know, let's say, it has to do with 5 things. 5 teachings, 5 people, 5 types of people, 5 types of situations. In the book of the 3s, it's 3s. In the book of the 11, it's going to be 11. In the book of the 7s, for example, you could find bojjhangas, because they are, how many? 7. Book of the 7s, remember? So this is Anguttara, from Anguttara Nikaya, book 5, sutta number 28. Pancangika Sutta, Discourse on the 5 Factored. Bhikkhus, and you have suttas that start without, thus have I heard. Usually, because Venerable Ananda was the one who is known to have used Evam Me Sutang in the first council. This is what I personally heard. That's him talking. But you have other suttas where it doesn't have that. So some have thought that it was also Venerable Anuruddha, because he was also alive, he was also part of the first council. And he was also known to be the backbone of the Anguttara Nikaya, because he was an expert at meditation. And this Nikaya is full of different techniques. Especially you have, if you have any mention of the Dibba Chakku, the divine eye, guess what? Venerable Anuruddha is somehow involved in the recitation of that sutta. Or at the very least, the validation of it. So he would be questioning to see if there's any errors, because these were going into the hard drive, if you will. These were becoming the canon. That's why it's so essential for us to go back to the first council. Whatever was included, that's it. We locked it. Okay? That's why several centuries later, when other discourses came out of the blue, we stay away from, because they have many, many ideas that were never taught by Lord Buddha. Dangerous ideas. We stay away from, because they leave us in samsara. That's why they're dangerous. So, bhikkhus, I will teach you how to develop the 5-factored right collectedness of mind. Samma samadhi, that's in Pali. I don't translate it, like I was saying yesterday, as concentration. So right collectedness of mind, or sometimes stability of mind, as practiced by the noble ones. Now listen and pay close attention. Yes, Bhante, the bhikkhus replied. And what, bhikkhus, is the 5-factored right collectedness of mind as practiced by the noble ones? Here, while secluding himself from all sensual desires and unwholesome thoughts, the bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thinking and pondering. Notice the first few lines. secluding oneself from sensual desires and unwholesome thoughts. It is impossible to go into a jhana if you are craving for something. If you're thinking about your ex, if you're thinking about that delicious food, if you're thinking of taking revenge on your neighbor. So when a student comes to me and says, Bhante, I can't get into the jhana, I was able to, now I can't, I have to ask them, what are you thinking about? What is your preoccupation in your mind? What are you constantly pondering on during the day? That has everything to do with being able to go into a jhana or not. That's why every single mention, and this has thousands of references, thousands of times you see this phrase in the suttas, again and again and again, about the first jhana, and the structure is always there. There's not going to be an exception in your case, where you have some unwholesome thoughts and you're still somehow getting into a jhana. That is self-deception. Because as you go into a jhana and come out, still something in you must have changed. You gave yourself a break from being hateful, for example. You gave yourself a break from being lustful. And then the words come up in thinking and pondering. I like to use the word planning. It fits better. Mentally planning. How many of you, when you sit to meditate, suddenly the internal administrator comes online and all of a sudden you're starting to plan things in your meditation? That's something that occurs a lot with meditators. You start planning, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to decorate my meditation room. I'm going to do this. After I get up, we're going to go this way. That's also pondering, planning. That's not going to allow you to go into a jhana. At least the second jhana. You will be stuck on the first. So these two are always termed as vitakka, vichara. Some teachers translate it in different ways. In the 20th century, different types of access concentration and things like that, they were part of that. But thinking and pondering makes things a lot easier because it's much more pertinent. With joy and bliss that arise from such seclusion. So another thing, you cannot be, at least to start with, going into a jhana, entering into a jhana, while being fascinated with company. Seeking companions, having people around you, enjoying. Maybe even companions in the form of radio, music, TV, sounds, things. These are different forms of distractions. They do not help you to seclude yourself. Seclusion is a must. There's no ifs and buts about it. If you want to go into a jhana, at least as a beginner, you need to seclude yourself. Yesterday I was mentioning how eventually a person can get into a samadhi even with their eyes open as they're walking. There are such levels of samadhi. But there are different grades of it, and the person must have developed their samadhi very deeply. They have gone into jhana so many times that they cannot count. So it really doesn't matter. They might be at the bus stop waiting for the bus, and they can go into that jhana, surrounded by so many people. But as starters, it doesn't work like that. You need to be secluded. And for you to go even deeper, you definitely need to go into seclusion. It might be a room, so it doesn't necessarily have to be in a forest somewhere, in a monastery. So, he then drenches and saturates his entire body with this joy and bliss that are aided by seclusion, allowing them to pervade the physical body from top to bottom and everywhere, without leaving any spot that is untouched by this experience of joy and bliss. It is just like a skilled bathman or his apprentice, who by putting some soap powder in a bronze bowl and while sprinkling water on it would mix it until it is a smooth ball of moist, oily foam pervading it throughout, without the ball of soap dripping or oozing out. Can you get that image? My father used to be a barber, and he would have this metal bowl, and he would shave men who would come, to get their shave. So I would look, and he would put some powder in, and he would just, he had this very funky looking brush, round, and he would just turn it, and all of a sudden I see bubbles. I was like, wow, look at that. And he would just use that on the face of the person, and then he would get his hands. In the old days, I guess people really put some effort into their craft, enjoy what they were doing, and really do a good job. And I would see him go at it, massaging the face of this person as if he knew him, and he would just massage it, really feeding the face until the face would be entirely covered with the soap. And then he would start shaving him. Now here in this case, it's not a barber who's shaving, but you might have heard of places, in some countries they still have bathhouses, and you have to pay them. And you go in, and they're not that many, but in some countries you still have them, some places. And they will do get the soap, and they will cover you up with it. So you can call it like a loofah or something, some bath tissue, whatever you want to call it, like spongy. And it would be covered up with this bowl of soap, which is bubbles, basically, just bubbles. But he really worked into it until it's really thick. And then he starts applying it on the body until there's nothing left. Even if it's so dense that you turn it upside down, it doesn't fall. In fact, a really good chef who makes an omelet, if they, or bake a cake, they get the egg white, and they get the, I forgot the name of it, the spinner, and the egg beater, yeah? And it just, to mix it, they get it so fluffy in the bowl that if they do it right, they flip it upside down, it doesn't drip. Nothing, it doesn't fall. Gravity doesn't pull it down. So similarly, the image that Lord Buddha is giving is quite amazing. He comes from royalty. He had his baths like that. He was the crown prince. He was going to get to be the king, remember? So the whole body is covered with that soap. Similarly with the joy that a person experienced in the first jhana. It exudes everywhere. From their head down to your toes and everything else in between. It's fuzzy. It's like goosebumps, goose flesh, tingles. So nothing to worry about if you happen to experience that. It's nice. So, in the same manner, the bhikkhu drenches and saturates his entire body with this joy and bliss that are aided by seclusion, allowing them to pervade the physical body everywhere, without leaving any spot that is untouched by this experience of joy and bliss. Bhikkhus, this is the first of the 5-factored right collectedness of mind, as practiced by the noble ones. Again, collectedness of minds stands for samadhi, a beautiful word that Lord Buddha invented, created to describe this state. Again, through the disappearance of both thinking and pondering, the bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the second jhana, which has clarity, self-confidence, and the stillness of mind that is absent of thinking and pondering, with joy and bliss that arise from collectedness of mind. When you don't have that noise called thinking, pondering, what remains is clarity, isn't it? When there are people talking around you, And all of a sudden they all become quiet. What is that? Is that a good experience or an annoying one? But that's what's happening all the time. I tell people again and again and again, please check the conversation going on between your ears. Right now, is there a conversation? It's not a conversation, it's supposed to be a monologue because it's just you. Conversation happens between more than one person. Ask yourself, is this helping me now? This conversation, this monologue, this chit-chat, non-stop from this morning. Even when you wake up in the middle of the night going to the bathroom, guess who's there? Ask yourself, is this helping me? What is this about? So long as this thinking and pondering is going on, you cannot enter the second jhana. It's impossible. Sometimes people have come and they said, and then I was thinking to myself this and this and this, and then I was thinking this and this, and yeah, Bhante, I was in the fourth jhana. I said, hold on. You cannot be. You're actually not even in the second. So Lord Buddha helped us to put these markers so we understand. That's why Lord Buddha is teaching us about these 5 different samadhi developments, where these can go. Here too, he drenches and saturates his entire body with this joy and bliss that are the results of his collectedness of mind, allowing them to pervade the physical body from top to bottom and everywhere, without leaving any spot that is untouched by this experience of joy and bliss. It is just like a deep lake that is fed by the natural spring underneath it, where although there being no inflow of streams from the east, west, north, and south, nor receiving any sporadic showers of rain to replenish it, so it's just there, a body of water, there's no rivers flowing into it, except for a natural spring from underneath feeding it, so it has fresh water. Yet the lake is still kept cool as it continues to be fed by the natural spring flowing underneath, quietly. There's no splashing noise when there's no rivers, streams flowing into this pool, because it's coming from underneath, right? And that's another symbolism, metaphor that Lord Buddha is using to demonstrate the absence of thinking and pondering. Because thinking, no matter how nice it is, it's noisy. It's annoying to the person who now is able to enjoy a jhana, especially the second jhana. Because in time, eventually, entering and getting out of the first jhana becomes tiresome. Even though it has joy in it. Because the person will start wondering, I wonder if there's more. And that is a brilliant question. Remember, the Lord Buddha had that question as Siddhartha. That's why he went from one teacher to the next and then said, forget it. You guys don't have the way. He left them. Because he said there has to be something more than this. 7th and 8th jhanas. This is not it. Something's missing. So, in the same manner, the bhikkhu drenches and saturates his entire body with this joy and bliss. So you have joy and bliss in the second jhana as well. But it does not have that same level of restless intensity of joy. It doesn't vibrate you so much. Your heart doesn't feel like it's going to burst up with joy. It's more subdued, but it's there. But it's still too intense for upekkha to be felt. Remember yesterday someone was asking whether upekkha is there or it shows up in the third or the fourth jhanas. I said, no, it's there all along, but because of the other factors of joy in this case, you can't hear it, you can't sense it, you can't experience it fully. Because it's being dominated by the other factors of the jhana. So, because this is the second of the 5-factored right collectedness of mind as practiced by the noble ones. Again, with the fading of joy, the bhikkhu abides in equanimity. Now we're getting into the third. Remaining mindful and fully aware, experiencing pleasure and happiness within the body as he enters the third jhana. Remember, it's now kind of demoted from joy to pleasure and happiness. If you ask the meditator, they say, Bhante, I don't feel that joy. Am I doing something wrong? I lost it, Bhante, I lost it. What can I do to get it back? And I look at their demeanor, I look at what's happening, I ask some questions, and then I find out that they are more settled. How are you doing? They say certain things. And I say, is that bad or good? They say, after I give them some moments to take their, to respond, they say, actually it's nice. Okay. Simply because it was joy and it's not there with that intensity doesn't mean that there's something bad happening. You're just going deeper. So within the body, as he enters the third jhana, for which the noble ones state, such a person mindfully abides in happiness with an ever-present state of equanimity. Here the bhikkhu drenches and fills his entire body with soothing happiness where joy has faded away, as he saturates and pervades his physical body with it from top to bottom and everywhere, without leaving any spot that is untouched by this experience of soothing happiness, with its joy having faded away. It is just like a pond where some blue, white, or red lotuses are born, grow, and bloom, while being immersed within the water, with their tops and roots remaining submerged, thriving in the cold water, without rising above its surface, as the cool water drenches, fills, saturates, and pervades the entire length of each of these lotuses, from their tips to their roots. In the same manner, the bhikkhu drenches and fills his entire body with soothing happiness, where joy has faded away, as he saturates and pervades his physical body with it from top to bottom and everywhere, without leaving any spot that is untouched by this experience of soothing happiness, with its joy having faded away. Bhikkhus, this is the third of the 5-factored right collectedness of mind, as practiced by the noble ones. Lovely, isn't it? Imagine on a hot, very hot day, and you go into a pool, cold pool of water. And after you splash around and you get exhausted, and you come out and you just lay on the side, on the dry land, how does that feel? You're not doing anything, you're not in the water, but it just feels nice, yes, right? It's that happiness, it's soothing. You're not in the water anymore. You're carrying the impact of that beautiful experiences you had. Now these jhanas, depending on the development of the practitioner, they can be in one for a long time, like more than a few minutes, and they come out of the jhana altogether. And they go back into it sometimes. if that's the instruction given by their teacher. And sometimes if they're able to, they go from the first jhana to the second, and then back again. And then to go back in and to the third jhana. Each time they could be given a certain instruction as to how long. It's up to the teacher or the person doing it. So sometimes they could be in there for an hour, or more, or less. And sometimes they might just go very quickly through them. It has to do with the determination and the level of proficiency, how easily trusting they are of this process, trusting of themselves. The critical mind, if you notice, is not here already. In the second jhana, it's gone. So if it is present, if you're being analytical, if you're being intellectual about it, you're not even going beyond, if you're lucky, you're not even going beyond the first jhana. Otherwise, you're not even getting into the first. So you don't just go into the third jhana directly. You have to go incrementally. It's like, the way I describe to students is like you go to the fourth floor having gone through the first, second, third, and then the fourth. Right? So that's the same principle is there. You can't jump. Because each of them are affecting the mind, the brain in a certain way. You need that effect, that influence to prepare. So, again, because by giving up both pleasure and pain, so now you've given that up, seeking the pleasure and pain, having a preference for either one, and having already gone beyond joy and disappointment, experiencing neither pleasure nor pain. We know where this is going. Is it still on the board? Upekkha? The bhikkhu abides in the purifying state of mindfulness with equanimity throughout, attaining the fourth jhana. This is where we really get a good taste of equanimity, upekkha, a really good taste. And the person might think they've never, well, what is this? It feels, for some people it's so shocking because it's so quiet, it's so nice, it's so balanced. It's unprecedented for the mind. Some people might think they have reached Nibbana, but you're not there yet. You just are no longer fighting between this and that. You're no longer stuck in the extremes of a pendulum. You're balanced, and that balance brings you extra peace and space. Because you're not engaged in any fights in yourself. Here the bhikkhu sits while his entire body is being pervaded with a pure, bright mind, without having any part of his body not be touched by the pure, bright mind. So everywhere he's feeling that, or she's feeling that. It is just like someone sitting while being draped from head to toe with a soft white fabric. I saw some of you sitting this couple of days covered up in white. It was just lovely to watch. Gave me that image of how Lord Buddha is describing, like being draped with white fabric. That means equanimity is pervading everywhere in the person. Nothing is being left untouched by upekkha. It's a nice feeling. In the same manner, the bhikkhu sits while his entire body is being pervaded with a pure, bright mind, without having any part of his body not be touched by the pure, bright mind. Bhikkhus, this is the fourth of the five-factored right collectedness of mind as practiced by the noble ones. Because it's a five-factored, so we have one more. This was number 4. Again, bhikkhus, the meditation object being used by the bhikkhu is properly grasped. Grasp does not mean turned into upadana. Here, grasp, I would like you to think about held properly. All right? So if you're thirsty and you don't have any cups or bottles to fill it up with water, and you're out in the woods, in the jungle, somewhere, outdoors, and you see a stream. You get down on your knees and you cleared any debris, anything away, so that you just have the water. How do you drink it? Do you grasp it? Do you grab it? Or do you cup it nicely, gently? Especially if you're going to give it to someone else. So you make a bowl out of your hand. So that is what image I would like you to think about, of holding, but you're very careful, you're very attentive. You're holding it, not to spill it, your meditation object. That's one of the reasons why we do longer retreats. Because the first, second day, by the third day, you're just getting into it, and then the retreat is over for a 3-day retreat. I know, but this was an opportunity that when Brother Leslie mentioned it, it was like, yes, let's do this. Because it's still something huge, especially because 2.5 years, nothing like this was happening. So you did it. So now the thing is, why don't you extend it, at least as far as your solo practice goes? Because if you don't, slowly, slowly you're going to notice whatever good effects this retreat has been leaving you with will truly leave you within a few days. That calmness, that serenity is going to leave you. But the moment you start doing it again on your own, treat it like your own retreat at home. Create those times, those spaces where you could do that. Close the door, put a piece of paper on the door, say, please don't disturb me if you live with someone else. Give them a time so they have an idea. Turn off your phone. Give yourself that retreat. No one can do this for you. No one can attain a jhana for you, you know. Definitely no one can attain nibbana for you. Only you can. But you're not going to do it without work. So, the meditation object being used by the bhikkhu is properly grasped, protected, mindfully attended to, and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom. Remember, this is a wisdom path. Lord Buddha's path is wisdom. Bhikkhus, it is just like when a person looks at another person who is sitting or lying down, and he knows and is fully aware that they are sitting or lying down. In the same way, while staying with his object of meditation, the bhikkhu properly grasps, protects, and mindfully attends to it, while thoroughly penetrating it with wisdom. Bhikkhus, this is the fifth of the 5-factored right collectedness of mind, as practiced by the noble ones. So just like you're sitting, you look around, just look around you right now. Turn around, just look at the person next to you. Do you see them in that state? Do you see them sitting, reclining maybe against the wall or something? It's so self-obvious, it's so self-evident, it's obvious. Similarly, the person knows that they are with their meditation object. You're staying with. The image I gave you, I think, was about you holding the hand of sati. Right? Your meditation object. Stay with metta. Stay with it. Because the moment you let go of the hand, you don't have metta. So that's what this is saying. Just like the bhikkhu sees someone sitting, they know that they're sitting. If they're standing, they know they're standing. I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? It's obvious. That's what he's saying. Bhikkhus, when the noble 5-factored right collectedness of mind is cultivated and developed in this manner, the bhikkhu is then capable of knowing through the clarity of understanding, that is, the wisdom of the heart. The word that Lord Buddha uses for the heart, in this case, he used it interchangeably. He calls it chitta. Chitta. And whatever he directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature. Whatever he directs his mind to, he realizes its true nature. Because he left his own thinking, his own predilections, his own ideas about the world, opinions and things out. That's why he or she is able to enter into this jhana and refine it. Because now we have wisdom. And whatever he directs his mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature wherever and whatever it might be. So whatever state the mind is in, whatever fluctuations, whatever nuances, there's so much that's happening to the mind. The words can only tell us so much, but they're very poor to describe exactly what's happening to the person experiencing these jhanic levels. It is our own work that will reveal these things. Much more than a smartphone can, social media can. That keeps pulling us in for something wonderful that we're always constantly looking for, never find. The news article, the news piece, something, an image, something, an event, something to pull us out where we can find satisfaction. We will never find it. The greatest of adventures is found here. Going into your mind, into your heart, if you allow that. So, bhikkhus, suppose there was a water vessel placed on a stand, full to the brim where crows are able to drink from it. Now, if a strong man were to tip it over, would water spill out from it? So it's pretty high up, full to the brim with water. Yes, certainly, Bhante, it would, replied the bhikkhus. In the same manner, bhikkhus, when the five-factored right collectedness of mind is cultivated and developed in this manner, the bhikkhu is then capable of knowing through the clarity of understanding, that is, the wisdom of the heart, and whatever he directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature, wherever and whatever it might be. You don't have to go looking for it. Ask around to get other people's opinion about the matter. You will ask the most important source, and that is the heart. That is ultimately where everything is to be found, everything of worthwhile. The Dhamma is found in your heart, not in your thinking, your analysis. I know some teachers teach you, might have taught you differently. It's thinking, thinking, thinking. We have to always consider the angle that the teacher has, their own predilections, their own constitutions, their own dispositions, their own ways of thinking, analyzing, their own personality. And then compare it to the Dhamma. Chitta is another word for mano. Mano is not just mind and that's it. It's interchangeable depending on how Lord Buddha is using it. Chitta, the heart, if you will, because that's the closest English word that I can think of. Think of it as your center. The gut feeling that people talk about. You know it in your gut. You have the hunch, as they say. You know it, you know it. Even though there's no evidence, there's no proof, but you have the biggest proof. And guess what? It is true. You always find out. So, Lord Buddha used chitta many, many, many times to describe Nibbana. So it's not something to be looked down upon compared to mano. Okay? So be aware of that. Akuppa ceto vimutti. Ceto and chitta is the same thing. Ceto. Akuppa ceto vimutti, which is another descriptive of Nibbana, supreme. So, that's what the word here is. Wisdom of the heart. In the same manner, bhikkhus, when the five-factored right collectedness of mind is cultivated and developed in this manner, the bhikkhu is then capable of knowing through the clarity of understanding that is the wisdom of the heart. And whatever he directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature, wherever and whatever it might be. Do you see here the repetition? Lord Buddha gave a very significant importance to the repetitive way of teaching. Because a student might miss the first, second, third, 343rd time. But eventually they might finally get it thanks to the repetitive mechanism that was applied by Lord Buddha. Hence, we need to keep the repetitions in the suttas, in the discourses. Yes, it can be boring for some, but that's the whole point. Who's bored? The avidya in you is bored. That means you're hitting the wall of avidya, which is a good thing. To demolish it, you need to hit it. And the more you hit it, the better chance you have to demolish it. I say this because many, if not all of the current modern-day sutta translations, I've seen it also in the Pali texts, some Pali versions, have the ellipses, ... Well, Lord Buddha never used ... Never did. Because just like you know, I see people coming and going, what if the person left and they missed that portion? Remember, he was the kindest, most supreme teacher of all. He would go walking hundreds and hundreds of miles to get to that one single student whom he knew was ready. He would walk. He's the Buddha. He doesn't technically need, right? But that's what makes a teacher a teacher. And we have to take example. We have to emulate that as teachers, as people. So we repeat it again and again and again. So that's what we're seeing here. In the same manner, bhikkhus, suppose there was a chariot well harnessed to thoroughbred horses, standing ready on a leveled ground, with the reins and whip ready at hand. And this term, leveled ground, is something that you see in the suttas a lot. Unleveled, uneven ground. Because in those days, you know, it took, just like today, if you're going to level a ground, it takes a lot of energy, money. Roman roads are still around because they put a lot of effort and money and manpower to build them. 2,000 years later, you go and you can walk and you can even drive on them. That's how leveled they are. So similarly, for a chariot to be pulled by mares or stallions or horses, if it's uneven, it's not going to fly. It's not going to travel that fast. So when there's always a reason why Lord Buddha uses certain words. He never uses them just like that, for fun. Because he just felt like, no, it has to have a significance. Uneven versus even. Leveled ground, with the reins and whip ready at hand. Then a skilled charioteer comes, and by mounting the chariot, he steadily takes the reins in his left hand and the whip in his right hand, driving it forwards and backwards in any direction as he wishes. Remember, we're still talking about the meditator and their hold, protection of the meditation object. But remember, they had to start somewhere. So when I insist on starting with just one spiritual friend, and I see you fighting me, why this friend, Bhante? I have more friends. Why can't I choose more than one? Why can't I choose my parrot, bird, you know? Why can't I choose this, my own family? Just use it, it's temporary. Learn how to take care of this. Eventually, you will have all the animal zoos as you want. Zoo animals, yes. So, in the same manner, bhikkhus, when the five-factored right collectedness of mind is cultivated and developed in this manner, the bhikkhu is then capable of knowing through the clarity of understanding that is the wisdom of the heart, and whatever he directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature, wherever and whatever it might be. Because this is an instrument, you're sharpening this instrument, the mind. Every time you sit, you're not idly sitting there. If you're doing work, if you're not lost in la-la land, you're not blanking out, you're not lost in ideas or longing, you're really observing. You're sharpening your mind for a purpose. And we'll see. And if he so wishes to exercise the various kinds of psychic powers, such as while being one, may I become many, and then revert back from being many to becoming one again, may I move without any obstructions through rocks and walls or other fortifications as if walking through space. May I dive into the earth and come out of it as though it were water. May I walk on water without disturbing it, as though walking on solid ground. May I sit comfortably and fly through the air like birds of all sizes do without any difficulty. May I reach and touch the moon and sun, so powerful as they are. In this way, one wields the power that extends as far as the Brahma world. Then, in this manner, whatever the bhikkhu directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature, wherever and whatever it might be. If you notice, these abilities were listed after we've covered the fourth jhana, or anything higher than that. You need the ability to experience and to stay with equanimity in order for you to, if you choose to, exercise or go deep into psychic powers, which are just powers. It's just being able to speak Chinese. Really, not for a Chinese person. It's not for somebody who really knows how to speak Chinese. I don't know how to speak Chinese. Many of you do. So you have psychic powers. No, but seriously, for a person who has not the ability to speak a foreign language, but then you develop it. We all have the ability. We just have to put the time and energy, and we have to create the right conditions. That's what these jhanas are. So they're not otherworldly. That's why Lord Buddha, you know, when I was first studying these suttas years ago, I was like, oh, this is, wow, this is so much like Hollywood, it's like, you know, superhuman something out there. But then over the years, I see how prevalent these themes were. These were like common. I was like, wait a minute, I'm missing something here. You mean to say that all of us has these qualities if we work on it? Yeah. If you have a brain, yeah. Okay. Years ago, when I didn't know French, and people around me did speak French, I used to get so frustrated, and I would think that it's impossible to learn it. It's just not possible. They have a special gene. They have something else. The universe is unfair, something like that. And then after many tears, many months and things, I was able to speak it. I haven't spoken it for many, many years, but I saw myself speaking with actual French people. Half an hour, 45 minutes later, I'm thinking I'm speaking in English, but then I realized I've been speaking French with them. What's happened there? We have abilities. We just need to work on them. Psychic powers being one of them. Now, one of the requirements is that the person has to get to the fourth jhana. The mind has to get to that point of settlement, established firmly in upekkha. Otherwise, you don't have control. Now, sometimes from life to life, depending on how developed the person was, the bhikkhu was, it doesn't have to be a bhikkhu, it could be, you know, anyone, if they have gone into the practice. You can lose control. Because the key thing is to be able to hold the mind properly, maintain it, know how it is, right? If it's standing, standing. If it's sitting, you know. I need to get back on the horse. I need to get back in charge of, am I with the meditation object? Am I with the breath, for example? In the literature, I have not come across this in the suttas, so I've come across it in some material. It could have been commentarial. But basically there was this bhikkhu who had a young student, and they lived in the forest. And after doing a little bit of meditation, this young boy began levitating. And the teacher saw him and he's like, okay. So the teacher knew that he had some past work done. Okay, the mind settled and boom, went into fourth jhana, but the child didn't know what was happening. Was aware, he would even see himself on top of the trees. But he didn't have control. He was just going by whatever the mind was used to. He didn't have any sila. He was simply benefiting from the fruits of yesterday's work. Okay, the credit from yesterday. So the teacher would always try to get him to sit down and practice and learn the basics, to understand as to why, what are the steps to go through, how to control the movement. Because it's not the body moving, it's simply following the mind. The mind is getting familiar in some state, but even the mind doesn't know what it's doing, because it has worked so much on it in past lives. It's like those cars. When we were children, we would have these cars that create momentum, like a spring inside. You just roll the wheels a few times and then you let it go. What happens? That's what's happening. All the work that you've done with the mind doesn't go to waste. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed, right? First law of thermodynamics in physics. Same principle. Anybody who wants to know Kamma, there you go, first law of thermodynamics. And the second one, actually. So this child, one day, he's a teenager now, but he's refusing to do his meditation properly, to train himself. And it's one of those days, and he's floating up at the top of the trees, the canopy. Suddenly, he is now in puberty, and he happens to hear the voice of a young woman. He's never heard that because he's lived in the forest. What is that? His concentration shakes. Desire rises in his heart, and he falls, breaking several bones, bruising himself severely. And the teacher goes, grabs him, takes care of him while he was crying. So then he says to the teacher, tells him, did you learn your lesson? No. So we need to have the wisdom present. It's just an ability. You know, Mozart conducted, I believe, his first opera at the age of 11. Have you ever seen a score of an opera? Just seen it? It's very incredible, actually. People live their whole lives studying how to write and never do complete one. He did it. He completed it at the age of 11. He did his first symphony, I think, at the age of 7. Well, how many 7-year-olds do you know who do that? So there's another telltale sign of what Kamma Vipakas are. An effort, most importantly, that we put in the mind, in cultivating the mind. So basically these show up if the person, they don't show up naturally. If the person has worked on them in the past, they will show up. Usually you see this also in the lives of some arahants. There have been cases of arahants who become arahants and all of a sudden these abilities show up. Not everyone. Venerable Sariputta did not have these. And if he wanted to, he would get them, they would say, because he was a chief disciple, and as a chief disciple you have certain privileges, if you will, because your merits are pretty amazing. But he never was interested in having these abilities. Whereas you have other arahants who have had those abilities. Like Dabba Mallaputta, who was only 7 years old. He became an arahant on his ordination day. Young 7-year-old. There's a when a person gets ordained, the upajjhaya, the person who's ordaining you, will give you 5 things, words. Kesa, loma, nakha, danta, tacho. Head hair, body hair, nails, fingernails, danta, teeth, and skin. As the shaving began, with the first stroke, he hears the word kesa, body hair, head hair. He becomes a sotapanna. As the shaving continues, the second stroke, he becomes a sakadagami. Another stroke, he becomes an anagami. By the time he's done with the full hair being shaved off of his head, he's an arahant. 7 years old. So, and with it, he also has these abilities show up. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many incidents like this. So, I don't want to digress too much. But when it fits, you know, I like to share these so you can have some gems with you that you can take along, and maybe it would get you interested to explore some more the suttas. Why not? And if he so wishes, while possessing the divine ear, far surpassing that of the human in its strength and purity, may I hear the sounds of both heavenly and human beings, whether far or near. This is not with the human ear. Remember, it says the ear, the divine ear that far surpasses the human. It's not just this, you know, ear we're talking about. Then in this manner, whatever the bhikkhu directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature wherever and whatever it might be. They know it, they hear it. Somebody might ask, well, how do you hear it? Do you hear? I can't hear it. How come you hear it? How come you see it? Well, it's not with the optical nerves that they see, or with the with the ears. Chitta, remember? The heart, intuitive ability. If you ever know a mother, or if you've been a mother, ask them, how do they know when the child, especially if there's a newborn, how do they know when it's time to feed the baby? Some mothers will know. They will rush into the room and feed the baby. How do I know? I was always curious. There's a deep connection, intuitive knowledge. And you see this not just in women, you see this in men too, and about certain things, decisions, where you want to walk, or you want to go down a road, and something in you says, no, don't go. And you don't. And then you see something horrible happens. So these are not superstitious things, these are real, because that person at that moment listened. Now in the case of such a person who's developed in their meditation, this is happening all the time, as they direct their mind to, whatever it is. So in this case it's the divine ear, whatever they want to hear. And if he so wishes, may I encompass the minds of others with my mind, and know the mind that is obsessed with lust, and those that are without lust, knowing the mind that is infested with anger and hatred, and the mind that is free from anger and hatred, knowing the deluded mind and the mind that is without delusion, knowing the mind that is contracted and the scattered mind as scattered. Contracted meaning You're lost in sloth and torpor. You're drowsy. That's the mind when it becomes contracted. It's almost like shut down. You're like, you can't pay attention. You're bored when you're meditating. You get sleepy. And then the scattered mind is another word for restless mind. Uddacha, remember? It's also one of the sangyojanas, the fetters, we covered the other day. Knowing the expansively great mind as expansively great, and the one that is limited as limited. Knowing the mind that is transcendent as transcendent, and the one that is not transcendent as not being transcendent. Knowing the collected mind that is stable as collected and stable, and the one that is uncollected as uncollected. Knowing the released mind as released, and the unreleased mind as unreleased. Then in this manner, whatever the bhikkhu directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature, wherever and whatever it might be. One of the things that happens with the arahant, when they become arahants, this is from the suttas, again and again we see this, and from the actual accounts of arahants themselves, whether it's in the Theragata, Therigata, or from recent arahants and their testimonials, we come across these three knowledges that occur. One is the knowledge that pertains to one's own past lives. They will see their past lives clearly. It's like you remembering where you used to live before where you live now. Do you remember? Like the location of the house, the apartment, or somebody shows you a picture from last year and you say, oh yes, I was there. You start seeing them all and you recall one after another if you want to. You go somewhere in a country and say, what is my relationship to this place? And that's one thing which I recommend whenever, if any of you are going to go to the pilgrimage, especially into India and Nepal, ask yourself, not just in the case of India and Nepal, but wherever you go, especially if you feel certain things, ask yourself, what is my relationship to this place? And drop it. Don't keep thinking and analyzing. Just ask and let go. And then look around. Feel the place. You haven't always been in Malaysia, you know. Just saying. So I mentioned that is the first knowledge. The second knowledge is the ability to see, to have the knowledge, to know where a person is going to go in their next life. And to see where they're coming from when you see a newborn. You'll be able to see that. So that is the second knowledge. The third knowledge is what pertains to what we just read here. Because just like it says, a released mind, you will know it's a released mind. You will see a contracted mind. You are paying attention, remember, to what state the mind is in. There's no ifs, there's no wondering about things. I wonder what, I can imagine. No, it's real. You see it. Do you know you're sitting? Right now, do you know you're sitting? It's as clear as that. So the third knowledge involves understanding clearly that the asavas are wiped out in the mind, in the heart. You don't have any more mental contaminants. The defilements are gone. Poof. All that chiseling away, all those sittings for years, clipping at it, you're hitting away at avidya with every single moment of mindfulness. Suddenly the whole mountain is gone and there is no asava. There's no avidya asava, There is no bhava-asava, and there is no kama-asava. The three mental contaminants that keep us in samsara. Actually, some people add ditthya-asava, but that disappears already in the first attainment, when a person becomes a sotapanna. It was added later. Basically, the three asavas, the contaminants. So that's the third knowledge that comes at the point of, that's how the arahant knows that they are now an arahant. It's not guesswork. They don't go asking for someone else's opinion. You have cases where an arahant, a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, goes to Lord Buddha. Some people have misinterpreted that they were going to get the confirmation. Is it true, Bhante? Is it true? No, it's not it. They went to basically show their gratitude to Lord Buddha, because they know they have the same experience of Nibbana as Lord Buddha does. There's no question. They know. That's why other people looking at them say, oh, this person is like, is just a regular person. Lord Buddha jumps in and says, don't say that. You're adding kamma to you. You're making ignorant statements. Such and such a person is an arahant. But he's so young, or he's so, he was not an arahant yesterday. How come he's an arahant now? So you have all those stories there. And similarly, and if he so wishes, may I recollect my manifold past lives. So this is the first of the knowledges that I mentioned. And where I lived, be it one lifetime ago, or 2 or 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 1,000, 100,000 rebirths through innumerable world contractions, innumerable world expansions, Big Bang, innumerable world contractions and expansions. Thus may I recall instantly, there at such and such a time and place I was such a being, with such a name, from such a family, and with such an appearance, and such was my pleasure and pain for me, enjoying such a lifespan. And afterwards, once that life ended, I died from that state and I was reborn into another form, in another place and time. I recall how, disappearing from there, I was reborn here. In this way, one recollects their manifold previous births with all of their details. Then, in this manner, whatever the bhikkhu directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature, wherever and whatever it might be. If your mind is not able to settle in equanimity, you will go crazy. Literally, you will go mad. Because let's say you're a woman now, you have a husband. How do you feel if all of a sudden you find yourself being a man? And you see yourself as a man. And you remember your wife. For some people, that's so shocking, it's earth-shattering. What if you discovered that you were a dog? Or a prostitute? But you happen to be this very prestigious, very upscale, you're the next king of England. But you used to be a prostitute. You see what being a prostitute means. You are there, you're seeing all of the activities. If the mind is not settled, you can have psychosis, which in psychology, in psychotherapy we call when the mind tears, in a sense. The fabric of reality tears. And it's very difficult to put it back, if not impossible. That's why Lord Buddha would encourage a person to go deep once they've reached a certain point, to elaborate on these aspects of one's past. You can think of it as nature's mechanism of protection, protecting you. That's why one identity is enough. Yeah, the curious minds who want to disprove karma in past lives, they will use that. They will say, well, if I live those lives, how come I don't remember it? Yeah. If I allow you to, let's say, if I had that power and I show you, you can tell them, if I show you all the aspects of your relationships in just one life, you will go mad. Just one life, this life. Let alone 2 lives, or 3 lives, or 4, 5, 6, countless lives. When people come and say, but my mother, I miss my father, I love my parents, I love my children, I lost my... Okay. Without being disrespectful, without being cold, I would ask them just regularly, just casually, which parents are you talking about? And they say, well, what do you mean? My mom and dad. And I say, from which time period? Which life are you talking about? They look at me funny. And I said, let's be fair. You just didn't drop out of the sky in this form and that's it, you know. You had many, many, many lifetimes, and in each of those lifetimes you needed parents to take care of you, whom you loved. You had children whom you loved. Why are you concerned only about these children? What happened to those that you were ready to die for? So that dissipates, loosens up your fixation on whatever you are currently enamored by, whatever you are lost in. So thinking about these other aspects of your lives, plural, can make the intensity of whatever experiences you're going through less and less and less. In COVID times, especially in the beginning days, where people were just like running around like crazy, fearing everything, panicking, I say, okay, hold on. Do you think this is the only life you've had? Especially if these are people or, you know, meditators or know something about Buddhism, Dhamma. And they say, yes, Bhante, I know. I've lived many times. Okay. Did you die at the end of that life? Yeah. Do you think you're going to live forever in this one? Because this one is special. And they say, oh, don't be silly, Bhante. Of course not. Say it again. I didn't hear you. Are you going to die at the end of this life? Yes. Okay. How is that pressure? How's that panic now working for you? Are you still panicking? But if you're fixated on it, yeah, you will continue to panic. So bring these things to mind also. Because we are very attached to this life as if this is the only one. It's funny. And if you are being exposed to the Dhamma, you have more tools than most other people on this planet. Because you have the privilege, you have the good fortune of coming across the Dhamma that Lord Buddha taught. It's so clear. You should not be fooled into believing the stuff that they put out there for the rest of the planet. You're smarter than that. You should not be fooled by whatever they throw at you, making you want to keep this body intact. Healthy. What health are you talking about? Ever heard of old age, sickness, and death? It's part of it. Dukkha, anything? You remember dukkha, anicca, dukkha, anatta? What is that? A little bit of realism helps. So, and he says, and afterwards, once that life ended, I died from that state and I was reborn into another form, in another place and time. I recall how disappearing from there, I was reborn here. In this way, one recollects their manifold previous births with all of their details. Then, in this manner, whatever the bhikkhu directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature, wherever and whatever it might be. And if he so wishes, while possessing the divine eye, Dibba Chakku, which Venerable Anuruddha was known for, far surpassing that of the human in its strength and purity, may I see beings that are dying and being reborn into their various new realms of becoming, be it into the miserable planes of existence or celestial planes. Whether they reappear into the unexalted and exalted states. Unexalted means lower realms. You're able to see that as well. It could, a dog, animal realms also. The beautiful or the ugly, all these various forms of good and evil rebirths, may I know and see them for myself, so as to how these things reappear into such realms according to their actions thus. So you're seeing clearly the connection of a person's actions to their form of rebirth. So you see a child that is born without arms, or a child that is born with a hole in the heart. You don't go, oh. You see more deeply. You understand. When the child doesn't have an arm, you understand the role of kamma vipaka there. The evidence of it is screaming at your face. You see it. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. And you're not taken by the story of everyone trying to start becoming very miserable around that and becoming sad and, you know, melodramatic about it. You just understand. Or when you hear a child dying, you don't lose your senses. You understand. Or somebody burning alive. You understand. So remember, understanding and wisdom. But you cannot have that if your mind is all over the place. That's why upekkha is necessary. And you cannot have the full length, extent of upekkha until you allow the mind to come to that restful position, which is in the fourth jhana. But don't think that now you don't have it. Every time you're sitting, you're walking towards it. You're allowing more space for upekkha to happen. Every time you're practicing mindfulness to see, why am I getting mad? Why am I getting sad about this? Why am I losing my senses? Let me look carefully. Let me look carefully is using the language of upekkha. But upekkha is the full spectrum of it. You are walking upekkha. You are breathing upekkha. Nothing shakes you. No matter what you see from your past lives, or whatever you see in other realms. Because if you have the Dibba Chakku and you probe, you look into the hell realms, or even some of the animal realms, it's so shocking. That can itself create psychosis in the mind that is not prepared. It's horrendous, some of the things that are going on right now. Even in this realm, there are people who are doing some incredibly brutal, incredibly vile, unethical, unwholesome, terrible things to other human beings that you don't know about, you will never know about. What if you see that? But your mind has to be calm. That's why it's extremely important for upekkha to be established in your heart, not to be shaken. So, and he says to himself, may I know and see them for myself as to how these beings reappear into such realms according to their actions thus. These beings who engaged in non-virtuous behavior, whether through bodily, verbal, and mental actions, rebuking and disrespecting the noble ones, and who, through their wrong views, kept accumulating evil karmic results due to their wrong actions, after the death of the body, are reborn into the lower planes of existence, the bad destinations, where there is unimaginable suffering and pain, the hell realms. As for these other human beings who engaged in virtuous behavior, whether through bodily, verbal, and mental actions, venerating and supporting the noble ones, and who, through right view, kept accumulating good karmic results due to their right actions after the death of the body, are reborn into the higher and celestial planes of existence, the good destinations, where there is unimaginable pleasure and ease, the heavenly Deva realms. In this way, with the divine eye, one sees beings that are dying and beings reborn into their various new realms of becoming, be it into the miserable planes of existence or celestial planes. Whether they reappear into the unexalted and exalted states, the beautiful or ugly, all these various forms of good and evil rebirths, one knows and sees them oneself. As to how these beings reappear into such realms according to their actions. Then, in this manner, whatever the bhikkhu directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature, wherever and whatever it might be. And if he so wishes, this is the apex of the sutta. This is the most important part of the sutta. And Lord Buddha says, and if he so wishes, with the complete release of the citta from the contaminants, asavas, may I, in this very life, realize the heart's perfect release through wisdom, and to this end live while abiding in this supramundane realization with direct insight, then, in this manner, whatever the bhikkhu directs the mind's attention to, he realizes its true nature, wherever and whatever it might be. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Because ultimately, it's all about that release. It is not about some psychic abilities. It has to serve you. These psychic powers, so-called psychic powers. And we have rules also, as bhikkhus. There were some bhikkhus who did display these initially when there were no rules against them, because they didn't have any bad intentions. Somebody needed something, they did it. In fact, in the earlier days, there was one attendant of Lord Buddha's in the Gijja Peak, the Vulture's Peak, where King Bimbisara came once because he had heard of this bhikkhu attendant, a Kappiya of Lord Buddha's, but they didn't know he was just a Kappiya, but he had the abilities. And Lord Buddha saw them coming, and he says, okay, fine. And he allows this Kappiya to go. He says, go ahead and show them what you got. And if you get to the Gijja Peak, which is in Rajgir, we have to walk up. Sometimes you have actually porters. They will, if you can have a lounge, basically it's like a seat, chaise lounge, as long, so you sit in there and they carry you up the stairs. But you miss the whole point, because on the way there you're going to see a few caves. One of them for Venerable Ananda's, one of them was Venerable Sariputta's. So nice views. But there's an area where you go and it's like there's the valley. So this attendant, I forgot his name, was not Sabhiya, I forgot the name, anyhow, it doesn't matter. So he says, okay, Bhante, and he goes walking in the air, does chankama in the air, back and forth. And I think he also does some light shows. And oh, they're so impressed. And to such a point, because the Lord Buddha is sitting there, so there's no action happening, because that's how fickle human beings are. Even though the king was there and, you know, his attendants were there, his, you know, ministers, they were like, wow, wow. So the attendant comes and bows down, pays homage to Lord Buddha, and they say, oh, okay, so I guess if he's the student, his teacher must be wow, even more. So there's stories like this, but then it can easily, especially if the person is not an arahant, it can get to the head, because that becomes a way to gain in popularity, want some popularity, which is something that is happening in the world today with teachers, not just bhikkhus, but especially bhikkhus. Even though they don't have psychic abilities, it's just ludicrous the lengths that people go to enjoy that popularity status. That's not the role of a bhikkhu. A bhikkhu also means, homeless, means poor, relying on other people's generosity to live, a person who lives in seclusion. All these things fit the characteristics of what a bhikkhu is. So Lord Buddha, to avoid other nonsense, he just said, don't do these things. Don't do it anymore. Because what you had were people who were claiming that they have certain abilities and powers to gain food, especially when there was a famine. We have this in the Vinaya. That's why a bhikkhu is not allowed to state anything about their attainments, unless the bhikkhu has students and they are noble disciples and they're going through deeper and deeper states, and it would help them to grow in their practice further. So it all has to serve the Dhamma, not the bhikkhu. But what you had at one point where there was a famine in India, in that part of India, and you had some bhikkhus who had the smart idea, smart I use very loosely, pejoratively even, who went to a village and they said, because people were barely having food to give to their own families. So they went to the villagers and they said, oh, do you know my teacher? He's an arahant. Oh, do you know me? I'm at least an anagami. Oh, I'm at this. So everybody in that group of bhikkhus suddenly became noble disciples or even arahants. So they were selling themselves as such. Now, the people, the lay people, knew that if you give food to a noble disciple, that's really going to set you good, set you up very well in your next life. So, instead of feeding their own families, they divided. They gave only a small portion of the food, left it for themselves, gave the big chunk of the food to the bhikkhus, to this one group of bhikkhus. And this was happening during Vassa, rains retreat. Now, the Vassa is over. There's Pavarana, we have a special ceremony which completes the Vassa. So everybody goes and surrounds, Lord Buddha, all the monks in that region. And everybody's emaciated, everybody's skinny because everybody lost a lot of weight, because the area was in famine. People didn't have food. The bhikkhus also became, emaciated, lost a lot of weight. Except for this group of monks. So Lord Buddha looks at them and says, you seem to be well-fed. Tell us, what has happened to you? And they said, Bhante, we figured it out. We went to the village and we told them, my teacher is this, I'm like this and that, this. Basically lies. But look at us, we survived the rains. We had plenty of food. Lord Buddha scolds them, chastises them, and he makes it a parajika, a defeat. A defeat for a bhikkhu, meaning you're out. That means you can never become a bhikkhu again in this life. If you ever go outside and say something that is not true, especially in regards to attainments, that's why it is forbidden. That is the reason. So I'm sharing with you things that lay people don't know about, but you just know or heard about, oh, a bhikkhu cannot say this. Well, why? There's always a reason. Lord Buddha always had a reason to make up a rule. He didn't like rules, He was a rebel. From the start. But when you're working around idiots who constantly break rules, who don't have decency to think about, wait a minute, this thing that I'm going to do, is this going to harm the sasana? Is it going to make people, especially the lay people, lose faith in the Dhamma? Is it? Even if you have the slightest doubt, you stop doing it. That's what a decent person does. Unfortunately, these people were not that decent, so they had to be given rules. That's why we ended up with 227. But when you're dealing with, when you're working with, when you're encountering somebody like Ajahn Man, as I mentioned this morning, who was an arahant, he just needs the first and only rule that matters. The rule that every single decent, noble disciple has, and that is the rule of maintaining control over the mind. You don't need the 227, because you have decency. I know many, many lay people who practice more rules than 227 without knowing. You know why? Because they're decent people. Decent people. They don't wear robes, but they're decent people. So decency comes first. Okay? Titles come later because they're empty. So I will stop here and ask for any questions that you might have.
I saw in one of the sutta, I think the Bhante involved must have been an arahant. A few cases.
Could you say it again, please? In one of the suttas?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think he know his time is up, so he paid respects to the Buddha. Mm-hmm. Then he flew up in the air and he started cremating himself. And the dust, they don't even have a speckle of dust drop down. This is one incident. But now, I used to went for self-retreat in Penang. There was this Ananda Jodi. He was telling me in Bodh Gaya, there was people meditating. There was a nun meditating somewhere in Bodh Gaya. And then there was a fire. The nun was missing, but there's something there. So people suspect the nun must have did what that Bhante did in the sutta. Is it the same as the attainment of fourth jhana? Then they can only do that because we can do self-cremations. So much less trouble.
But how many people do you know who can get into that level of jhana?
Is it? That's why I'm trying to ask you. Is it jhana or was it something else?
Okay, good question. You were actually talking about Venerable Dhamma, the one that I mentioned today. Remember, the 7-year-old? He had the various psychic abilities, but he was known for a few special ones. After he became an arahant, and he had those abilities, he said, well, I have attained to the goal of the noble life, of the holy life, at 7. This is why a person goes and ordains. So I have reached it. What do I do now? He's only 7. So, but because he's an arahant, he's also wise, even though he's 7. He says, I want to serve the sasana, I want to serve the sangha, and I will propose 2 different positions for me to occupy in service of the sasana. And he goes to Lord Buddha and the sangha with these 2 proposals. He says, Bhante, I would like to be the designator of quarters for bhikkhus. Quarters as in where they will sleep in the monastery, in the forest. And especially because in those days they already were having monasteries built, kutis. So what you would have were bhikkhus who would have to travel long distances, and they would come exhausted. And they would come visiting Lord Buddha. And so they wouldn't have necessarily a designated place for them to rest for the night or the week or however long they were going to stay. So he was officially proposing that he becomes the designator, the person who will assign those rooms, those kutis. Because when you have thousands of arahants, thousands of monks, there's only 70 of you. So it can easily go haywire. There has to be order. Who's going to sleep where? How are they going to eat? Whatever. So he proposed that, and it was accepted by Lord Buddha and the Sangha. And the second proposal was, again, related with the community. And he said, Bhante, I'd like to be the assigner of who among the bhikkhus can go to lay people's homes for lunch. Because lay people would come, just like today, some of you might go to the temple vihara and say, we would like to invite 10 people to our home tomorrow. You might not know the monks, or 3 monks. I have enough space for 2 monks, or 1 monk, or you might know that 1 monk, but usually it would be an invitation for a few monks. But who will go? You might have some greedy monks. They will say, I'll go. Okay? But you have to have order. So Venerable Dhamma was proposing that he becomes the person who assigns as to, okay, you and you and you went yesterday, so you can't go today. You go to Pindapada. Okay? You 3, you haven't been going to any invitations, so please, you venerables, you go to this house. So he was the person. So he proposed that, and Venerable Lord Buddha accepted, and he commended him for that, as well as the Sangha. Now, many bhikkhus, once they found out a special quality that Venerable Dhamma had, they started to sneakily show up at night time. Planned their arrival to the monastery at night when it was dark. Why? You see, Venerable Dhamma had he had psychic powers. So at night, sometimes he would notice that monks were coming and there's no light. So he determined that he would use his thumb as a flashlight. So he would just point the thumb, whatever, the thumb would light up. It doesn't have to be the thumb, by the way. It could just be something like, it would be a halo, or even his whole body could light up. And wherever he goes, it's just light. It doesn't matter. It's in the dark and you have a light source, it's going to make everything bright. So in his case, the suttas say that it was his thumb. It doesn't say it was from the back or front, but just use that image. Now, when bhikkhus found out, through the grapevine, now whoever didn't want to visit the temple, the monastery, now wanted to. Because Venerable Dhamma is there, we just want to check it out. People were as curious as you are today. If you hear about someone having psychic powers, what do? We want to go. Just once. So they were showing up specifically at nighttime. No one was showing up during the day. Because they wanted to see. How is he doing it? So that was one of those things. And unfortunately, Venerable Dhamma also was wrongfully accused by the Jains. Jains were very wealthy, they still are, in India and other parts of the world. But because he was so popular, just like in the case of Venerable Mahamoggalana, they would go after selective monks who were known, who were famous. And Venerable Dhamma was famous, plus he was young. So when he's barely at the age of, like 17, 16, 18, people, there's a woman who comes and accuses him of sexually molesting her. And as was the case with every single accusation. Now, Lord Buddha knew who was being accused. He's an arhat. It's impossible. Even if it was a sotapanna, it's impossible for the sotapanna to do such a thing, let alone an arhat. It's impossible. Doesn't work. They never can break a sila. Okay. So Lord Buddha says, call Venerable Dhamma. Dhamma comes and he bows to Lord Buddha and he says, yes, Lord. And he says, Dhamma, there's this woman who's accusing you of sexually molesting her, raping her. And Venerable Dhamma says, Lord, I belong to noble disciples. No, I'm not, you know that. So this is totally like, how can I even answer that? This is not even. He says, Lord Buddha, for the record, Lord Buddha says, Mallan people, and he was Mallaputta, he was the son of the Mallans. Remember, Mallas were the place where Kushinara, where Lord Buddha was burned, cremated. That's their main principality, kingdom. Lord Buddha says, Mallans were never known to give indirect answers. So be direct. Because Malla Dhamma didn't answer him, no teacher. So Lord Buddha wanted Dhamma to give him a correct and very definitive. And he says, yes, Master, I will give you the answer. And the answer is no, I've never seen this woman, I don't know what she's talking about. And he says, that's all you need to say. And the woman confesses. Because she sees in whose presence she is at, and who it is that she's accusing, and of what. Now, over time, Venerable Dhamma did not live for too long, because he already had enough. Because there was another incident. They again accused him of some sexual thing. And for those reasons, we also have rules in the Vinaya. Because somebody accused Venerable Dhamma of something, he had nothing to do with it. But to avoid such a situation from ever occurring, Lord Buddha instituted a rule. So the day comes where you described, and because he was a master at, especially the fire kasina. The fire kasinas are different discs. Think of them as discs. You have Patavi or earth kasina, so you look at it, and you just meditate. So this is an absorption. I always have recommended individuals who want to experience these things, first become an arahant. Please. Then go ahead and waste your time. Because on the way to being able to do any of these psychic things, what if you die? There goes another opportunity of being born as a human. At least if you're an arahant, that's it, lights out, you're good to go. Who cares about psychic abilities? But for fun, if you want to, go ahead. If you still want to, which is a big question. So Venerable Dhamma was known for his ability to go in and out of kasinas, especially the fire kasina. So one day he goes and he says, Lord Buddha, Bhante, it is time for me to go into Parinibbana. And Lord Buddha, because he had already done his work, Lord Buddha says, Dhamma, Mallaputta, you may do as you please. And he says, yes, teacher, and he bows. And I think he also gives a Dhamma talk, because that was a usual protocol before an arahant died. Lord Buddha would always request that the bhikkhu or bhikkhuni who was about to die to give a Dhamma talk. What a lovely thing to do. And then he goes into the fourth jhana, and he rises off the ground, and he brings to mind the fire kasina, and he engulfs his body. So much so that he burns his body to the point where he does not even leave us any relics. Completely exhumed. Completely extinguished, not exhumed. And that's that. Now, as far as what you mentioned in Bodh Gaya, you said there was a nun probably who committed that. I have never heard of that. Because over the last, in the 70s, you had in Vietnam a few cases where Mahayana monks were burning themselves and in revolt of whatever the status, the political scene was, to show, I guess, whatever injustices and things were happening. Again, I have no idea whether they were even in the first jhana or the fourth jhana. All I know is I've seen one picture of one of these meditating monks who had poured gasoline on himself, and his body was burning. Half of his face is still in flames, but you can look carefully and you can see he's squinting. That will not happen in the jhana, in the fourth jhana especially. That indicates that this person must have been feeling something, feeling the pain, but his adhitthana, maybe his willpower to subdue his screams, might have been stronger. So I don't see it necessarily as the same case as Venerable Dabba's, because he was an arahant. Because ultimately it's suicide in a sense when you think of it, right? He's ending the life, one's own life. And it's their choice, fine. But so long as the person, I say it's their choice in his case, because they have completed the task. Because the last thing you want is to die and show up in a miserable realm. In a realm where there is constant fire that doesn't end for an eon. What if you land there? What if you miscalculated? Oops. So that would be terrible, right? So for that reason, the least requirement, I would say, should be for the person arahantship. Not even anagami. You don't want to, even though an anagami will go straight to pure abode, if they're really developed, at the end of this life, they might just enter parinibbana. But still, that's risking it. First become an arahant, and then, I would say. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
My question is quite short. What's the correlationship between jhanas and the noble ones? How do we equate the two, Bhante?
A very good question, I would say, that you ask. You can be experiencing, you can be entering and exiting all 8 jhanas and still have a long way to go before becoming a noble disciple. In India today, you still have people attaining to the 7th and 8th jhanas. They're not noble, because they have not severed the bond of samsara. Even a knife did not go through that to loosen it up. And this was the case with Lord Buddha's, Siddhartha's teachers. And that is how we know that we are living in a dark age where there's no Dhamma revealed. There's no Arya Satyas declared, Four Noble Truths. There aren't. That's dangerous time. So you might still have people with good conduct, but no wisdom. Panya is the thing which distinguishes everything. Panya is the key factor. In your short answer, your short answer to your short question, panya. Remember, it's not knowledge of something. It's not data collection. It is knowledge. It is wisdom. Wisdom of what? Understanding anicca, dukkha, anatta on a deep, deep level. Understanding the 4 layers to existence. The fact that there is dukkha, there's a cause to dukkha, there's a way out of dukkha, and the actual path to get you out of dukkha. That is not present in a person who just does the jhanas, for jhana's sake, for its psychic powers. Now, can the two unite? Can you find the two? Absolutely. Well, the example of Venerable Dabba serving as a wonderful example. Venerable Mahamoggallana, Venerable Anuruddha. So Yeah, so, but simply because a person is going in and out of jhanas does not mean that they are Arya Savaka or a Sekha, a noble disciple. They need to have had jnana dassana, knowledge and vision of the Dhamma, which completely transforms. These are not supposed to be esoteric things. They're not. They're not mystical things. And that's why I try to get you back to understand what it means to have sila, samadhi, panya. As you are continuing on this path, you will start seeing more and more gaps in your old ways of thinking. In those gaps, you will have some insights. You will have these aha moments. Wow, I never thought of that. I never seen it that way. You will have more and more and more of those. Those are the tiny little beads, if you will, the collection of which turns into panya for the person. And the more you have them, the less will be the possibility for you to make your old mistakes reoccur. And that's where the transformation is happening. Until you get to a point where you're no longer doing those akusala kammas. Suddenly you see the relationship between, like, what is this thing called self? What is this thing called asmimana? This conceit, I am, this is mine, this is me, this is mine. And what am I so driven by these rites and rituals? Is this really effective? Or am I wasting my time? Because my parents did, my grandparents did. Why am I doing this? And I feel comfortable with the teaching of Lord Buddha, to the point where suddenly it will hit you, and you go, oh, guess what? The 3 Sangyojanas have dropped. And you become a noble disciple. So, now you can have it that way, or you can also have it as you're going through, progressing through the jhanas. I recommend the jhanas because that's what Lord Buddha recommended as well. Now, does that mean that you must have the jhanas in order for you to have jnana dassana? Absolutely not. You can attain the first stage, second stage, third stage, and fourth stage even by listening. But how? Listening, how? Less of this, more of this. Allow the Dhamma to sink in. Don't argue with yourself in your mind. Analyze. I don't think about, I don't know, I don't agree with you there. Let me take that, no. No, wait, no. That is wasting valuable time. Instead, allowing the Dhamma to reveal itself. You always have the possibility to get to a deeper level of experiencing this thing called life through the Dhamma. And no, you don't need to go through the jhanas. But it helps. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions? Yes.
Is it considered craving if we have aspirations to be, want to be reborn, at least in the human realm, in the next life? We know we have to die this life. But then I've heard from one discourse that, from a venerable, that most of us will die. Most of us will die, definitely. All of us will die. But we will come back mostly as ghosts. That is what scares me. So I was thinking, if we're going to come back as ghosts, what should we do now? And second question is, I have a relative, his son, a young son.
Oh, you have a relative.
A relative, his young son. I mean, he says, I can see things. I can see ghosts. As we were having dinner one evening, he said, I can see them, they're in the trees now. They're also in my dormitory. And I always see them, but I'm afraid, I'm scared. So what is the meaning of all this? Thank you.
Well, I don't know about meaning of all of this, but I can address some of it. Let me see, the first question was about hungry ghosts being reborn. Well, I don't know who the Venerable was, and what group of people he was addressing, So that has to be also clarified. But if you are among a group of people, or you're one of, how should I put this? We are cultivating a population of humans for the past century at least, that is driven primarily by greed, by the thinking, what's in it for me attitude. What do I get out of this drive? You have entire countries, cultures based on this. Everybody wants to be the next billionaire. Everybody wants to have a rich role model. No one wants to have a poor role model who's wise. So you see the elements of greed there. Of course, that doesn't mean that everyone is stingy. No. They're very selective, though, with whom they are miserly or stingy. I know many people, I know many relatives who have money, who work very hard, but they don't spend a dime on people or situations where they're not going to be in the spotlight. Their names have to be in golden letters if they donate something. They need to see it, and they need to send pictures of it to everyone. Or they will they will give their money, they will be generous selectively with their children or their grandchildren, or whom they choose specifically in their own DNA pool, specifically in their immediate family, their own children. That has tremendous greed there within it. Does that fulfill the requirements to a great extent to be reborn as a ghost? Absolutely. I agree with that venerable, in that sense. But when someone says, everyone is going to go, no, I don't think about it. No. Now, if you add lying to that equation, to that lifestyle, so the person is miserly, stingy, plus lying, then you're actually going a rung lower than that. You're going to hell. And that's one of the reasons why I always try to tell people, please stop lying. Today you have a lot of cheating going on between spouses. Don't do that, I say to people. As a psychotherapist, I would encounter this a lot. So I would have no secrets policy. When I did couples therapy, I say, first session, I don't do couples therapy now, of course, as a monk, but I would tell them when they first approach for couples therapy to work out their differences, I would say, please, when I do see you separately, individually, whatever you tell me needs to also be told to your partner, by you, not me, but don't tell me any secrets. Hey, you're the therapist, so you keep it here. No. So if you're cheating, you must be telling this to your partner. That's how the relationship will heal. But that's looking at it from the outside, not from a religious context necessarily, but as a factual, existentially speaking, yeah, the person is going to go to hell. And you have many, many examples in the suttas. There's conversations between Venerable Anuruddha and Lord Buddha. He says, Bhante, why do these people end up in hell? I see this type of people reborn in hell. What is the reason? And Lord Buddha explains in the Anguttara Nikaya. So yes, if you, let me say it this way. The next moment is going to come out of this moment. However you feel, whatever you're thinking about, however you're dominated by emotions and whatnot, the next moment is going to come out of that moment, whatever state. So this I've said again and again, especially to individuals who are thinking about suicide, harming themselves. Oh, I want to end it. I want to end it. Okay, are you in misery? Yes. Are you in pain? Yes. Okay. Imagine yourself in one room and you're in pain. And then there's another room. Or you're angry, extremely angry. The door is open. Now there's a person standing there at the entrance of the other room who doesn't see you here. He doesn't see what your state is now. But now you're angry, you're hot, you're angry, you're upset, disgusted. As you take a step, just a step, into this other room, what will they see in you? Will they see you angry or happy? Angry, upset. That's where you're going. The only problem is now you have to start from scratch, and usually, if not always, the circumstances are going to be a lot worse because there's not going to be any Dhamma. Guaranteed. There's no Dhamma in hell. You can't. So that's one of the reasons why I always try to urge Sangvega in people. Anywhere you listen to any Dhamma talk, if there is, forget about how nicely the speaker is or how knowledgeable they sound or impressive or how big of a following they have. It all means nothing. They need to be teaching you the Dhamma that is based on Sangvega, urgency. They need you to put all your energy to make the most of this life. That is a teacher that you need to listen to. That is a person who's talking Dhamma. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening a lot. Just be happy, just do nice things, do good. That's not Dhamma. What is that? You see that in all the other traditions. You don't even have to be in a religious practice. That's not Dhamma. Urgency has to be. Urgency is what's stopping a person from committing those evil actions. And that's the thing which is going to stop you from being reborn in the hell realms, in the animal realms, in the ghost realms. And as far as your relatives seeing things, challenge them. Say, oh yeah? I will believe you when you start seeing divine beings. Devas. I challenge you to go ahead and see some devas for a change. Because they're a lot more easier to see, by the way. If you're so obsessed, because that's the culture that I see here. Everybody's obsessed. Oh, ghost, 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 ghost. Wake up! What's wrong with you? What happened to devas? You eat food thanks to the devas, you know. There are devas who are near the ground. If you eat delicious food, guess what? Some devas have touched it. Or at least touched the humans who prepared the food for you. But you never give them credit, do you? You're so fascinated with the evil or ghosts or whatever. Ghosts can't do anything. Can't do anything. They can't even eat. But there's the fascination. Ooh, and plus, depends on what they watch. Your nephews and things. You know, these last 10, 20 years, there's been many shows in America, especially, like stupid shows. They actually, if you watch them, you can almost tell your IQ, your brain cells dying. You can really feel them dying. So there's less and less neurons in your head after you watch the show. And they are programmed. That's what you see. And unfortunately, even from what I know, I don't watch movies, but from what I know, the movies that they've been making, Hollywood has been making, it's substandard. There's no story. There's only special effects, no story. And that tells you a lot. People are becoming dumber and dumber in the world. They are. Just my thoughts.
That's what sells one day.
Yeah. That's what sells. And you're selling out also. You're selling out your precious opportunity of being in, you know, having a human birth. Yes. That's what mediocrity is. mediocrity. So I hope that answers your question.
So there's hope for us.
I don't have an answer. What do you think I've been doing here for all this time? So push yourself out of your comfort zone. Because most of us don't take refuge when we take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. That's just not true. Really. Most of us take refuge in Kilesam saranam gacchami, taking refuge in the defilements. Lobham saranam gacchami, dosam saranam gacchami, moham saranam gacchami. That's what we really live by. So we have to change that. Otherwise, we're stuck. It's your life. Do you give your house keys to anybody on the road? You protect your properties, your belongings, more so than you protect your life. Do you know that? How silly is that? We do that. You have more care towards your utensils in your kitchen than you do about your life. Your bank account, you have more attention given to your bank account than you do about your mind, your life. If you did have even the same level of commitment as you do have towards your credit card or your savings, I'm not even talking about your health, because there's just been, people have been obsessed with their health. Do I have something on me? Let's say, let me take this sanitizer. We've become ridiculous across the globe. I've seen this during the past 2-3 years. I've traveled. Even in the worst days of COVID, I was traveling through empty airports, going and talking to people, pointing this out, pointing the mirrors, showing them, like, see what crazy behavior you're displaying. If somebody else was doing this, you would laugh. But you're doing that. There's no panya. If you're in human birth, you look down, you have toes, you have eyes. Oh my God, I'm seeing. I can see, I can understand. I'm even hearing the Dhamma. Of course you have hope. Not just hope, applicable opportunities. But the drive has to be there. You must be more dedicated to making something out of this life than your bank account, than what you have in your closet, than your car, possessions, or how much money you're going to leave to your children, for your children. Can you change that? That's when you're actually practicing. Because most of us are hypocrites, let's be honest. We live all that, we do all the calculations, mortgage, this, that, property, this, make sure we have enough investments, this, that, everything else is taken care of. And the little bit that we have over there, yeah, I'll do that with the Dhamma. All those things will not get you to, even if something as mediocre as heavenly birth. The Dhamma will. Arahantship, Venerable Tattva, at a very young age, that's what distinguishes somebody to become an Arahant at 7. At 7. So we have all these fictitious standards. I'll say this and then I'll stop, even though my throat is finished. But hey, one time a lay woman sends news to the monastery, says, please, Venerables, send 4 arahants for lunch. That's how many they were. So the news I guess, let's say it was Venerable Dabba who was assigning who's going to go to meals. So he sends, or somebody sends 4 arahants. Now the only thing is that the lady of the house and her husband had prepared food for only 4 bhikkhus. But the bhikkhus they had in mind were old, in their mind. So the arahants who were supposed to come were going to be full-grown adults, gray hair, you know, because that's what many people think of a teacher. A really good teacher must be old. And the harder it is for them to walk, the more believable they are. And if they are on a wheelchair, that's how ridiculous our standards are, aren't they? And or the other standard is, how many followers do they have? How famous they are? How many books did they sell? All these nonsensical standards which has nothing to do with the Dhamma. Anyhow, so these 4 arahants show up to this house, and they go in, and the lady looks, and it's just teenagers. At the most, like 14, 17, maybe 16 at the most. And she goes, "What is this? I asked for senior arahants, and what is this?" So she sends regard back to the vihara and says, "Please send in some senior arahants, some old." She says old. So Venerable Mahamoggallana, Venerable Sariputta are there. They come. And they go and they see there's 4 arahants. They don't see novices. You know, you have to be 20 years old. So they're novices. But they know better. They know these are arahants. And they see that there's enough food for 4 people. Quietly, they see that, they acknowledge, they leave. The chief disciples leave. And now the lady of the house is really perplexed. Like, why did they leave? Those are seniors. What is this? What is this? This is a joke. Meanwhile, time is passing. And if you're living with very strict rules, especially in those days, you know, you had to eat at a certain time. Okay? Like 11:30-ish, you should be eating. So now it was getting late. And if they didn't eat, that's now going to be extra harmful for the lay people, especially this lady who invited, because she now left 4 arahants hungry. At that moment, Sakka, the king of the gods, seeing what's happening, he shows up in front of this lady and her husband in full glory. And she's like, oh. And he turns towards these 4 novices, arahants, who don't even have a single hair on their face, and bows to them. And he says, "Bhantes, may you enjoy the meal." And the lady goes serving them quickly. Just an idea of approaching beyond, going beyond your expectations, because we have all these foolish expectations which come from nowhere else other than micchaditi, wrong view, and there's plenty of wrong view in the world. Now you're lucky, because in Asia, especially in Malaysia, I've noticed there's a lot of good, thirsty minds and hearts for the Dhamma. I've been around the world, you know. And you have here something very special. You have many people here with genuine interest and thirst, desire to understand the Dhamma. That is rare. Don't lose this opportunity. Especially when you get the Dhamma at your footsteps, at your doorstep, coming to you. Don't waste this opportunity. Practice. But you must practice with a clean slate, without dragging your expectations, like that old lady who's thinking that an arahant has to be of a certain age. No different, right? 2,600 years later, we have that today. So, I hope that these words that I share with you are inspiring. That is my hope. Inspire you enough so that you practice and you give it more energy than ever before. You trust the Dhamma more. It's never about the speaker. Always look for the Dhamma in your heart. That is the most important thing. Don't waste the opportunity of a human birth. And I will stop here. Sukhi Hod.